Thank you, Paul, for having me. Thank you, Health Catalyst, for participating and listening to what I have to say today. I'm Dr. Sampson Davis. As mentioned, I'm an ER physician, board certified. I also do a lot of work throughout the community with philanthropy with the Three Doctors Foundation, an organization that I found some 20 years ago with two of my best friends, Dr. Rameck Hunt and Dr. George Jenkins. And that actually brings me to the point of how my whole journey began. I grew up rooted in Newark, New Jersey, inner city, a lot of struggle, poverty, a lot of crime, a lot of despair. Growing up when I was first born, obviously, like most children, I didn't realize the situation I was born into. To me, it was normal to have a home of two bedrooms with six siblings. And so sharing a bed with a sibling was great because oftentimes we had heat in the summer and AC in the winter, meaning that we didn't have the heat that we needed during the wintertime. So we were sort of bundled together to keep each other warm. And that was sort of my backdrop growing up, single parent home, 5 siblings. But all my neighbors, you know, they had the same sort of circumstance. And so it was an anomaly actually to have 2 parents in the household. So having one parent was pretty common, and not realizing at an early age this was not normal. You know, started off life, and life was good. We had fun. We made the most out of what we had. And I remember at an early age, my mother would tell me, you know, go to school, stay focused on your books and your academics. And at first that was great because what child don't want to do well in school when they're 6, 7 years old? The teachers say, oh, what's 2 + 2? Like, oh, pick me, pick me, pick me. And then, you know, it was good to sort of feel great, and it was good to feel that sort of acknowledgement from your teacher. But as I started to grow up and started to reach those double digits, 10 and 11, I began to realize that we were poor, that we didn't have some of the luxuries that were more common that I saw on TV and saw in some of my friends' home. And so for me, it just became like, okay, all right, I got to sort of make a way. So at age 10 or 11, I started to sell golf balls and push grocery carts for change in order to sort of collect some funds to take care of myself and my siblings. And as I started to grow older, survivability took over practicality. And what I mean by that, school started to take a back seat. School wasn't the most important thing. Although my mother preached that, it was about survival. It was about putting food on the table. It was about making sure you had electricity on. It was making sure that your telephone worked. And so I started to focus on those things, and I started to step out in my community. And my community was, blighted as it was surrounded by a lot of crime and despair. And so I found myself hanging around that wrong circle, and found myself doing things that I wasn't so proud of, things that I know wasn't who I was. And I was 13 the first time I was arrested for robbery, and 17 the second time I was arrested for robbery. And at 17, my life sort of had a wake-up call that I realized that if I kept going down this same road, that my life would end. And I remember I had this sort of out-of-body experience where I kind of like looked down upon myself, and I said, you know, Sampson, you have to change. Like, something has to change, or something has to give here. If you want to make something in your life, you have to take a conscious stance and step up and make a decision here. And so thankfully I was given a second opportunity at 17, and I was a juvenile at that time. I was charged as such, and I was given a 2-year probation sentence. And I went back to my senior year of high school, and I attended University High School in Newark, New Jersey, which was considered a magnet school, but it had its challenges, it had its issues, it had its sort of struggle in of itself. And I had 2 friends there who I mentioned that I formed the foundation with, Dr. Rameck Hunt and Dr. George Jenkins. Now, all 3 of us had known each other since we were freshmen in high school. But the challenge was we had to bus to the school. I had to take 2 public bus transportation to get from my part of Newark to University High School. The same with George, the same with Rameck. We all lived in different aspects of the community of Newark. I lived in the South Ward, George lived in the East Ward, and Rameck lived in the West Ward. And we would all sort of come together at University High School. And so when I got back to school my senior year, since I had been given this sort of second opportunity, I was strictly focused on my academics. I got A's and everything because I was always smart, but sort of showing that smart or that intelligence was something that was frowned upon in my community, which sounds like backward science. It sounds like a situation where you should embrace your academic excellence. And that's what I tell youth today, to make sure you do embrace your academic excellence. And I say, if your peers call you nerd for getting an A on the test today, that's fine. They'll be calling you boss tomorrow. So you want to make sure you celebrate your academic excellence. And in my community, I think just because of the despair, the struggle, and challenges, this sort of academic performance was frowned upon. And then the inadequacies of the school system. I mean, we didn't have the school supplies. We definitely didn't have all the educators that we need to sort of root the young minds from the destruction that was present, that we faced every day. But I think it's important to realize that we all are faced with challenges, and that was my challenge. That was my cross to bear, if you will. And so I pushed through, returned to my senior year of high school, and I still didn't know what my future held. I didn't know what I wanted to become in life. I never, ever, ever, ever in a million years imagined myself becoming a doctor. It was not something that was prevalent or present in my communities. Yeah, I saw postal workers, I saw teachers, I saw police officers, but I never saw a doctor walking my blocks in my neighborhood. So along those lines, once I returned to my senior year of high school, one day in class with both Rameck and George, we had a substitute teacher. Now I still had some mischief, and don't mistake that. I was still young and a teenager and doing silly things that teenagers do often. And second period class, me, Rameck, and George, we looked at each other. I raised my hand because we already knew what we were going to do was Operation Cut a Class. So I raised my hand and I had to go to the bathroom. Rameck raised his hand. He had to go use the payphone to call his mother. Imagine a payphone, that sort of archaic machine that goes along with CD players and 8-tracks. So he raised his hand and he had to go use the phone to make a call. And George had to go to the principal office to drop off an assignment. So this was kind of a story that we use often to get out of class. And again, just knowing what teenagers do sometime in their behavior. And so we gathered into the hallway, and we're like, okay, we can't stay in the hallway because security is going to spot us. So we ran into the boys' bathroom. And so in the boys' bathroom, we're like, okay, this is not a cool place to hang. And so we're like, all right, well, let's go to the gym. We can make our way to the gym. We get to the gym, we are blending with the class that's in the gym by going through the locker room, not through the front entrance. So if we go through the locker room, which was in the basement, we could come up on the side of the gym. There's a side entrance, which is very unnoticeable, and we could blend in with the class that's there already, and the gym teacher would have no clue. And so we started the process. We were walking down the hall to get to the other side of the building because the class were on one side of the building and the gym was on the other side of the building. And we had to go in front of the security guard, similar to where I'm sitting, the security guard desk sat. And our security guard was a little special. He would take his chair and he would turn it so that the back of the chair would be facing the hallway. And you sort of could creep by Mr. Brown, his name was. And by doing so, by creeping by Mr. Brown, who was there in retirement, he just allowed the students to sort of kind of roam the hallways a bit freely. And you got to keep in mind, this is, again, at the height of crime and despair in Newark. And a lot has changed since then. A lot of positive changes, but at that time where I grew up, this was what the reality was. And so making our way to the security guard desk. And we noticed as we were approaching it that the desk was empty. And that's weird because Mr. Brown, like clockwork, would sit there with his newspaper and his coffee with his back facing the hallway, and today the chair was empty. And so we started hearing these footsteps behind us as we were walking closer to the desk. And then the three of us stopped and we looked over our shoulders, and when you know it, there was another security guard, a substitute security guard that day working. And as soon as we made eye contact, he said, "You three, stop." And so with our selective hearing, we started walking faster. He started walking faster. Before you know it, it was a full-out sprint. We're 17 at the time. He's old, he's 40. He's never going to catch us. So we were running as fast as we can, top speed. Our goal was to make it to the end of the hallway. We turn the hallway. There's a door that leads to the locker room in the basement. We would come up on the other side. We were blending in with the class that's there. And the substitute security guard wouldn't know the difference between us and any other student. So we're almost at the end of the hallway. And before we could get to the end of the hallway, somebody appears in front of us. And it happened to be the principal. Now, at that point, I did want to say, time out, only because it's second period, and in my young adult mind, I said to myself, well, she should be in her office doing work, talking to some teacher or parent or something. Why is she roaming the hallways? But that was not my place, and that's neither here nor there. So now, sandwiched between the security guard and the principal, we were caught. We were pretty much caught. And just as a last ditch of hope or a last effort today of all days, there was another door that sat close in proximity that was usually closed, but today was ajar, it was open. And so we ran for that door, which happened to be our library, and we dove into the library. And so happened there was a seminar ongoing about careers in health and science being presented by Seton Hall University, a small Catholic school here in South Orange, New Jersey. And so the three of us scrambled, we found a seat, the substitute security guard and the principal looked in, and he said, let those three young men be. Maybe osmosis or some sort of diffusion reaction would take place and a greater good would be served. And so once I found out that the seminar was about college and going to college, I immediately went to sleep. And a lot of that had to deal with, again, I never thought about going to college, and you are what you're surrounded by. You can't aim for what you can't see. So here I am, a smart, intelligent young mind, but never thought about aspirations of higher education because no one in my family had ever went to college. So that philosophy of each one teach one is true, and it resonates even in this story I'm sharing with you, that is so powerful that each one of us have to give back something of ourselves. And that's what keeps the cycles of life. That's what keeps the community blossoming. And you're fortunate if you don't have these challenges or have to face these challenges, but my life has been a dichotomy. I have lived those struggles and those hardships, so I know firsthand what it feels like. I know firsthand what it feels like to go to sleep with your stomach touching your ribs, or your back, I should say, rather, and being hungry. And I know what it feels like not to have electricity and freezing in the winter. I know how it feels to see crime and destruction and to feel hopeless. I mean, hopelessness is a very catastrophic feeling. To feel that you don't have any hope is very catastrophic, but it's also very dangerous because a person at the end of their rope of despair will go to any place of where they need to go in order to survive. And so as I was sitting there, like falling asleep, Rameck Hunt listened in. He's an internal medicine doctor today at Princeton University. He listened in, and because he wanted to be a teacher, again, a shining example of what surrounded us. And he sort of held of that vision of becoming a teacher and educator because that's what he was around, but he felt that doctors and teachers, they do the same thing. They help people. They help people to get better, to become better. And so he listened in, and Dr. George Jenkins, who's a dentist of the group, he listened in because when he was 12, he was surrounded by dentists. He had the advantage of the opportunity to have an experience with an orthodontist. He had braces on his teeth. And at the time, the dental resident would teach George the different teeth in the mouth, the molars, the premolars, the central incisors, the lateral incisors, the canines, the different components of the tooth, the enamel, the dentine, the pulp. And George, being a pragmatic, practical mind, he said, okay, let me get this right. If the tooth is broke, I fix it. And the dental resident said, yep. And if I can't fix it, I pull it. He said, you got it. He's like, man, I think I can do this. I think I can become a dentist. And so the seminar ended, and the guys, we had this was second period. They were excited. Somebody nudged me and woke me up, and we were in the hallways, and we had to get to our third period class. We had about 4 minutes to get from one period to the next period. And so we're just walking to the next period class, third period, and these guys are just jumping up and down with joy and zeal and zest. And I'm like, man, like, so you see your friends jumping, so you start jumping. I'm like, what are you guys jumping for? Like, so you jumping, I'm just, we're together here, so I'm jumping with you, but I don't know exactly what we're jumping for. So like, oh, we're about to become doctors. So I said, okay. So I was jumping, but I wasn't jumping at size. So I was like, doctors like Trapper John MD, and like Quincy. And for the younger audience, Trapper John MD and Quincy is like the throwback to modern day ER. The show ER. And so I was like, all right, well, good. We're gonna become doctors. And at the time, again, I didn't know what my future was going to be like. And so I was jumping, but I wasn't jumping as high as they were jumping at that time. We would become doctors. And I said, well, how long is that going to take? They say, it's going to take, I said, is it going to take a year? Is that process going to take a year or two? And they say, no, it's going to take 8 years. So I stopped jumping. I said, hold on, let me get this correct. You guys want to go to school on purpose, for 8 more years? I'm like, man, I'm so happy I went to sleep. My goodness. And they say, no, it'd be great because we can do it together. We can do it as a team. We can make this process happen. And we weren't thinking that methodically or as systematically at that time. We just were grabbing hold of an opportunity similar to a dog grabbing a bone. We were grabbing a firm hold of an opportunity. So all 3 of us applied to Seton Hall University, and the counselor there, Carla Dixon, must have saw something special in us because she accepted all 3 of us, which was unpopular. You were only supposed to take 1 student from 1 school at most, at best. Ideally, take 1 student from each ward for a total of 5 or 6, but to take 3 students from the same school was unheard of. And so, I'm a big believer in faith. I'm a big believer in prosperity, and I just feel like this was a divine situation in this moment. So all 3 of us were accepted to Seton Hall University, and we started off with 145 biology majors, and college was great. Like, college was the best time of my life. It was so much fun, so many friendships, a different atmosphere, in the sense that I had my own bed, I had cable, I had heat in the winter, I had AC in the summer instead of the other way around. And I can tell you through experience, it works better having heat in the winter and AC in the summer. And a meal plan, which was a great added benefit. And they said, look to your left, freshman seminar, I look to your right. Somebody's not going to be here next semester. I'm like, don't look at me. The meal plan sealed the deal, plus the AC and the heat, plus just the camaraderie and the friendships. And college turned out to be one of the best 4-year periods of my life. We did everything together. We went to different homecomings, spring breaks, you name it. And every semester I performed well. I achieved the dean's list every semester. I challenged myself because at that point for me, there was no other opportunity. This was it. I cannot go back home. That was not an option. Either I was going to make it or I was going to make it. That was as simple as it was. And so starting off with 145 biology majors at Seton Hall University, 45 went on to graduate with a biology degree. Other people change their majors because biology is a very tough major. And once you study for your genetic test, your organic chemistry test, and you get a 35 or a 45, it sends a message to most students that I'm not capable of doing it. And I really want students to understand, to refute that, because I received some bad grades, but you have to keep pushing. You have to be resourceful in what you're trying to accomplish. So go to tutoring, sitting in front of the class, going to office hours, all to the professor office hours, all those aspects or those sort of pearls I performed or took part in order to make sure that I was able to matriculate. And so after we graduated with 45 biology majors, only 10 went on to receive their dental degrees, their medical degrees, or their PhDs. And the 3 of us, me, George, and Rameck, the collective known as the 3 doctors, was 3 of the 10 or so that went on to receive their terminal degrees. And so pushing through, applied to medical school, was accepted into medical school at Robert Wood Johnson here in New Jersey. All 3 of us, George went to the dental aspect of it, and me and Rameck went to the medical component of it. And med school was tough. I mean, it was a very challenging process in the sense that you had to consume a wealth of knowledge in a short period of time. And so there's a skill set to everything you do. It's similar to the tipping point by Malcolm Gladwell. You got to invest this time and this effort to become great at it, and then eventually it tips and it becomes its own self-fulfilled prophecy. But being in the beginning stages, I had to realize, okay, maybe I had to adjust the way I study, and I made all those adjustments and was able to make it through medical school. And upon graduating, I applied to residency all over the country, 45 different residency places, hospitals. And I traveled. I had a beat up Honda Accord that window was off, misaligned, the car, it was interesting. I would stop at a light and I would have to sort of press the brake and the gas at the same time to keep the car from shutting off. And so it was tough to do that because sometimes it would shut off and I would have to try to restart it. And sometimes it would, sometimes it won't. wouldn't. And it was very tough, especially when I had dates to go through that process. But, traveling all over the country, interviewing, and I remember even the whole thought of going to medical school. When I would go to office hours when I was in college, it was a professor, Dr. Linda Shee, who I met freshman year of college. She was about 5'1". By the time I graduated college, she was 4'7". And so when I told her I was starting medical school, she immediately jumped in a car. She said, "I'm coming to your dorm. I want to give you some money to get your books for medical school." I said, "Well, Dr. Shee, tomorrow's the first day. I don't need money. It's only be notes and introductions, and there's not going to be any work that I need to take part in per se. So don't worry about it." She's like, "No, I'm coming." So Dr. Shee, all 4 feet of her, jumped in her Honda Civic and came to bring me funds for my books the next day. And it was raining. It was like a monsoon. It was pouring down. I just could see Dr. Shee driving her car, coming to give me money. And that just touched my spirit and warmed me so much that was part of the whole emphasis of us even forming the Three Doctors Foundation. So to get back to graduating medical school, dental school, the 3 of us, we all graduated on the same day, me, George, and Rameck. The 3 of us, eventually we graduated high school together, college together, medical and dental school together. And at that point of graduation and gaining residency, the process of the residency portion that I was sharing with you, eventually I landed back in the same hospital. After all the interviewing and traveling all over the country, I landed back in the same hospital doing residency in emergency medicine that I was born in Newark, New Jersey, Newark, Beth Israel, the same hospital I was born in. I landed back in to do my residency. So it was almost, I tell you, it really touched me because thinking about that whole process of it all, it was unplanned, and it just sort of turned out that here I am now back in the same community I was born in, not as a person that's causing chaos or not as a person that's a part of the fabric of some of the poverty and destruction there, but now as the antithesis of that. Somebody that can sort of be a positive to the community, somebody that can grab a young person by the hand and show him or her the x-ray of a hand and the phalanges and the metacarpals and the 8 wrist bones and the radius and the ulnar, and understand what the bone mechanism and the way that the nerve operates, the median, the ulnar, and the radial nerve, and how it operates, and make the hand make a fist, and just knowing that as one finger, you can do a lot, but as 5 fingers coming together to make a fist, you could do so much more impact. And that was sort of the philosophy of the 3 of us. We stood by each other, we supported one another. It became more than just friends. It became a brotherhood. It became family. And going throughout the whole process of college and medical school, there were many times that we didn't have, but we supported one another. And that was really the sort of glue that held it all together. And the situation wasn't based upon Rameck or George holding me accountable. I wanted to be accountable because I did not want to fail those 2 guys. And so back in Newark, same hospital I was born in, I started to see some of the despair right in front of me. Young people, a lot of gun violence, just high blood pressure, diabetes. Immediately we formed the Three Doctors Foundation while we were residents. We would chuckle because we said we have to be the only philanthropist that we know of with student loans. And so we formed the Three Doctors Foundation. Our story when we graduated landed on the front page of our hometown paper called the Star Ledger, and it was above the fold. And so having 3 African-American faces above the fold for something that was positive was very, it was almost like an anomaly back then, still is to this day. And so the 3 of us on the front page of the paper, the story sort of took off. It picked up on what we call the wire, and it appeared in Washington Post, New York Times, and then at that time, the story gained momentum. We had opportunities to do a lot of television. Oprah called one day. I never forget, I was a resident at the time, first year, an intern. And she called and they said, and it wasn't Oprah, but the way I like to tell the story was Oprah, because it's Oprah, right? Oprah effect goes a long way. So I was washing dishes and they said, it was like, Oprah's on the phone. She wants you to be on the show. You have to come down. So I left the house, left the water running, went to the airport, no ticket, nothing. And they said, ticket please, security. Like they asked for my ticket. I said, no, Oprah. They let me right through security. I went to the plane, right at the ticket agent, and she said, ticket please. I said, Oprah, put you right in first class. That's like the Oprah effect. And so we went on her show, great time of my life. She touched my leg, I fell in love. She did not. I thought that was really unfair. But in any event, it was one of those kind of moments in time that here I am from where I came from. I never thought that I would have an opportunity to meet Oprah Winfrey. And the story just kept gaining momentum. We had an opportunity to write a few books. The Pact, P-A-C-T, The Pact was our first book that we wrote, became a New York Times bestseller, and it chronicles our life throughout the whole process of the challenges that we faced growing up. And it really became, I think, a blueprint for so many kids out there, regardless of what community you come from. And everybody's going to face a challenge in their life. It's if you live long enough, you're going to have some dark moments, and it's how you behave and how you overcome these dark moments that counts the most. And so we wrote The Pact. We wrote We Beat the Street, which is a children's version of The Pact. I wrote a book called Living and Dying in Brick City, which kind of deals with the life of the emergency medicine physician, and it deals with some of the health equity, health inequalities, health equality, health equity, healthcare disparity. And as we move now, I think I want to share this last bit with you. You know, we're still doing the great work with the foundation and still have an opportunity to travel and speak to people across the country, obviously in a different form. I miss the engagement like we all do. But being on the front lines of coronavirus and COVID, I saw it hit hard here first in New Jersey. In the Northeast, we were struck the hardest, New York and New Jersey in the beginning. And it's real. Like I could tell you it's real. 15 nurses from my emergency department contracted COVID. 2 of their husbands subsequently died because they contracted COVID from their wives. I lost a colleague, an emergency medicine physician, Dr. Frank Gabriel. He died from coronavirus. He was contracted it, and a few days later he fell sick and died, unfortunately. One of the biggest impact, or the biggest impact of it all, was I lost my brother to coronavirus. April 23rd, he contracted coronavirus. He developed a fever on the 22nd. On April 23rd, he passed. And so it's real. You know, I've seen the impact, and I see the implications that it has, especially when you look at those that are most vulnerable. And so when we talk about healthcare and equality, healthcare equity, healthcare disparities, you saw those who are more likely to have diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, affected by coronavirus the most. It's not that coronavirus has a radar to target that community, but it impacted those where for years and years, we talk about healthcare access, and healthcare access is great. That's healthcare equality, but healthcare equity is giving people what they need. So having more hospitals is great. Having more doctors is great, but having access to those doctors and to those hospitals to use in a sense of healthcare equity, giving a group, a community or individual what they need. And so that goes into the broader term of social determinants of health. And so social determinants of health is everything: the educational system, the transportation system, the crime system, the food banks, the job resources. All that plays a role into a person's success and a person's ability to overcome their healthcare issues. And so having data collected by you goes a long ways, because we get to track what is working or what is not working. Not the same thing is not going to work for each community. And so coronavirus has exposed a lot of, not only are we in a pandemic, which we are, but it has exposed some of the issues that has been long fed for many, for centuries. I would even go as far as to say in our country. And so we have to figure out a way to address that. And what's the magic answer? There's not one glove fit all here. It's a multifaceted problem. But in order for a person to gain access to better health, they had to have resources. They had to have a job that pays them well. Have patients who miss their appointments because they're working 2 jobs and they don't have time to come to the doctor. I have patients who don't trust the healthcare system. I mean, there's been so many things in the healthcare system to make it untrustworthy. Everything from the Tuskegee experiment, where African-American men were injected with syphilis to see what type of impact it would have, from the cognitive to the cardiovascular, to just the overall body function. We look at Helene Lack's experiment of what her genes did, but her genes were used without her permission. Her family has never received any retributions for the genes being used. So you look at some of the things that have taken place in our country, unfortunately, are moments that we're not so proud of. But at the same time, it goes to show how far we have come and what we can do to make it better. And as we deal with the racial tensions in our country at this time right now, I think what the pandemic has done has forced us all to sit still and to see what's happening, and to see some of the acts that are just not justified in this country, and that we have to have immediate attention and immediate action. As Martin Luther King said, injustice to you injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so I think, we're at this point in time in history where we can make a difference, and we have to find ourselves on the right side. And that's the main goal. And we will get past this coronavirus moment. We'll get past COVID. Unfortunately, I lost another family member recently too from the virus. And so when I look across the country, I think we have to buckle down at this point. We have to continuously collect data. Your challenge is to figure out how to have yourself and all that works with you, all that's a part of your team, to keep them involved and to know that all our work that we're doing out there is making a difference. The information gathering is key because we get to see where the need is the greatest. The information gathering is key because we could see how the sophistication of what is working and what is not working. The information gathering is key because at the same time, I can't do any of what I do day in and day out if I don't have the data and the computer system or the analytics to sort of justify, is this treatment correct or not? For a long time, or in the beginning of this process, we was using a drug called hydroxychloroquine, which was promoted by the president, which turned out to be a drug that caused more harm than good. And we were doing all that we could do to see what stick to the wall as far as treatment is concerned. Dexamethasone is a steroid. So right now, as far as coronavirus goes, what I do know is that washing your hands, wearing a face mask, and keeping your distance are the three top things that we all can do to protect ourselves. And as we move past this pandemic, every 100 years or so, there's always some sort of pandemic or some sort of threat to us as a society. But what I love about this moment, if there's anything to love, is the ability for us to come together and be supportive and stick together with one another. And as I look at what's next, I think, we're getting to a place where we're going to conquer this virus and we're going to have effective treatment. But until then, we have to continue doing what we're doing and just continuously, collect information that we need to collect and continuously take care of the patients that we need to take care of. But let's be mindful that when we look at those who've been impacted most by the virus, is those who are in the service industry, those that are in transportation, food, things that we need to do, that we have that we need daily in order to survive. And immediately when it hit here in New York, we were seeing families, because people were living 6, 7, 8 people to an apartment. So there's no social distancing that could take place. And so we saw family members and friends, 4 or 5 people in an apartment all lose their life to coronavirus. So we just have to be mindful, again, of health equity, giving people what they need, regardless of what, to get to where they need to go, which is decreasing the healthcare disparities, making health equality a thing that's real for all, and really just coming together and sort of making sure that we hit the road where the rubber meets it. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, Paul. I appreciate it. And let's keep on keeping on, as they say, moving forward. And this too will be a thing of our past.